All right, today we have a 2003 Hyundai Santa Fe. We're going to be replacing some rear brake pads on it. The customer has been squealing, or been hearing squealing, going down the road lately. Looking through the wheel, you're able to tell the rear pads are getting pretty thin, so we're just going to go ahead and replace those. At this point, until we inspect it, we're not going to change the rotors. The customer has not been feeling any pulsation or issues with them, so it looks like we're going to be just putting some brake pads on there since he is on a budget. So first thing we're going to do is go ahead and get it up in the air and take the rear wheels off. Okay, so now that we've got the wheel off, here you can see our brake caliper and the rotor. And again, we're not changing the rotor because the customer has not had any complaints with it, and he's also on somewhat of a budget. So we're just going to go ahead and just do the brake pads. All you really need to do this job is a 14mm wrench or socket and something to compress the piston in on the brake caliper, which I will show you in just a minute when we get that off. So what we need to do, our very first step, is to take off the two 14mm bolts that hold the caliper to the bracket. It's pretty simple. All you do is just break loose the two bolts. And at this point you should be able to unthread them the rest of the way by hand. Okay, and at this point what we do is just pull straight forward on the caliper and kind of wiggle it off of there. And you'll see that comes off, and we just set it aside. In this case, we're setting it on top of the control arm because you do not want the caliper to hang from the brake hose. The weight of the caliper on the hose can actually damage it. In this case, it's not very likely because it's such a small light caliper, but it's still not worth taking the chance. So once we have that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and remove our old brake pads, which you should be able to just pull them off and out of there. They might be a little bit stuck like that. There we go. If they get stuck, you might have to coerce them out of there by giving them a little tap, a little love tap. So here's our brake pads that came off. This was the outboard pad, the one that was on the outer one. This is the one we could see through the wheel. And you can see there's practically nothing left of that one. This is our inboard pad. Still had a little bit of life, but again, it's definitely ready to be replaced. So next what we're going to do is just go ahead and clean up the friction components on here. I guess is what you call them. They're contact components or something. What we're going to do is first pull out the slides for the brake caliper. They have these rubber boots. Literally all you do is just pull on them and they'll pop right out. So what we'll do is just give these a good clean up, wipe them off real good and get all this old grease and any contamination off of them. Once you have it nice and shiny looking, you want to use a brake lubricant and use a specific lubricant made just for brake parts, because it's a silicone based and not petroleum based. It will not wash off with water and it'll last pretty much forever. At this point all we do is just put a little smear on there. Spread it around a little bit and go ahead and slide it back into its hole. And we'll do the same thing for this one. And you'll see these slides now, they spin real smooth and slide in and out real smoothly. Next up, I'm going to pop off, if they do pop off, let's see. There we go. Pop off the shims, the brake pad shims, and give these a little cleaning. what I'm going to do is I'm going to go aside and spray them with some brake clean and get them all cleaned up, and I'll come back and show you. All right, so we got the contacts of these things cleaned up best we can. They're a little corroded, but they actually feel smooth. So if your new pads come with them, go ahead and install the new hardware back there, but a lot of times they won't. You just have to clean them up and reuse them. So, but if they're broken or anything, then you have to buy new ones. So we'll go ahead and snap these back in place. And what we want to do now is put a really light layer of lubricant on the surface where the pad is going to be sitting. You do not want enough where it'll goop off and touch the rotor. You just want just a real thin layer directly. You can see the amount that I'm using there. Just a little tiny bit. And just real lightly spread it over the surface of where that's going to touch or rub against the brake pad. Okay, I'll do it on the back side too. Okay, here you can see the difference between the new brake pads and the old worn out one. Definitely a huge difference. So this car is definitely ready for some brake pads. Now, the inner pads are side specific, which means what you want to do, see this is our inner pad, you want to match up to make sure that the wear indicator thingy is on the same side. If you were to look at the other one that comes with, you'll see it's on the opposite side. So that'll be on our driver's side. So what we can do now is go ahead and take our rear inner pad and line it up. You'll be able to see it a little bit clearer on the other side, on the outer pad. And it'll just line up and fall in place there. There we go. Sorry, that might have happened too fast. I'll show you that again. So what I did is take your bottom leg here and get it started inside here. See, like that. And then your top one like that. And then just push it and it pops in place. So next we just have to compress the piston on the caliper. Okay, so at this point all we have left to do is to compress our brake caliper. There's a couple ways of doing it. If you have a large C-clamp, you can do it. What you do is you just clamp the C-clamp like a big C around here, and you just tighten it down and it'll squeeze the piston in. You can also use a large pair of pliers to literally just clamp on it and squeeze it in. Or if you happen to have, I have a tool especially for it, which just makes it a little bit quicker. What it does is you just compress it in and you'll see the piston go in, and you just push it all the way in till it stops, and that's that. So now to put our piston or caliper back on, just line it up and slide it in place over the rear pads. And last is to put our bolts holding the caliper back in place. Once you get them snug down, one thing you want to keep an eye out for, there is this self-locking nut thing on the other side. Actually, I'll show you what not to do, because this is a real common mistake that I used to do all the time before I learned. When you go to install this thing, you want to make sure that this thing with the flat side on it lines up with this, can you see that? With this flat spot on the caliper. Because if you end up being wrong, it's going to sit on there all crooked and you're not going to be able to get this bolt started right, or you'll end up cross-threading it and just cause all kinds of problems. So you want to make sure that's lined up with this flat spot, and then it'll go on perfectly smooth. And that holds this thing from spinning when you go to tighten down the bolt. Is the point of that. So anyway, now we'll go ahead and tighten down our bolts. And that's it. So that's how you do just the rear brake pads on this Hyundai Santa Fe. So we're gonna go ahead and do the other side real quick and let you watch that and probably fast forward that. All right, so now we're on the driver's side of the vehicle and we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing, and we're just gonna speed it up this time, I believe, but we'll let you watch. We'll start by, just like the other side, just take off our 2 bolts and then everything else is the same. Okay, so this is our pad that came off on the inboard side. One thing our customer had pointed out to us, he said that it was making really loud squealing and then all of a sudden it stopped. So I almost suspected this had happened, and sure enough it did. What will happen sometimes if you let them go too long, the silencer or the squealer thing will actually break off of the brake pad. You can see that's happened here. If you compare it to the other side, this little metal piece right here is what actually hits the rotor, and that's what makes your squealing. You can see where it's broken off, and that's why it has stopped squealing for him. So even though it wasn't making any noise anymore, the problem had definitely not gone away. So if you hear weird noises on your car, definitely get it checked out right away. So that was it. Now we'll continue. Okay, so we're all set. All we have to do now is get the wheels back on, drop it down, and pump up the brake pedal. Again, that's a very important step. The reason for that is when you push the pistons in, when you go to compress the brake pedal next, it will, the pedal will go pretty much to the floor. So before you try to drive it, you want to pump up the brake pedal a bunch of times, and then you'll feel the pedal stiffen up, and then at that point you can go ahead and test drive it. So what we'll do is go ahead and just get our wheels back on, and then we'll be all set. All right, so we appreciate you watching. Remember, check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/APDTY, and on Google+. Give us a +1 on there, and subscribe to us here on YouTube. We're always trying to put out new videos for you. Hopefully you'll learn something from us. So thanks for watching. What does the impact wrench say? What does the car say? Vroom, 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 vroom. Vroom, 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 vroom.